Nearly 100 years ago, British economist John Maynard Keynes predicted that by now we'd all be working 15-hour weeks and that the biggest crisis people would face would be what to do with all their spare time. By the 1950s, modern conveniences were meant to make life easier, but today most of us still work more than 40 hours a week, and according to the last census, nearly 10% of New Zealanders worked more than 60 hours. Sports clubs and social clubs are on the decline, and there's the constant nagging worry at how much time we all spend looking at screens. I'm Whelan, and this is Great Ideas. Last season, we looked at the revolutionary ideas of the past. This time round, we're asking what the great ideas of the future will be. We'll look at work and food and what's happening to our biggest city. This episode, though, the future of leisure. I'm joined by three knowledgeable people from AUT, and I've asked them to tell us their favourite game.
I'm Scott Duncan. I'm an Associate Professor of the School of Sport and Recreation at AUT, and my favourite game when I was a child is one that's been almost systematically banned around the country, and that's Bull Rush.
Hi, my name's Sharon Davies, and I'm an Associate Professor in the School of Social Sciences and Public Policy. And actually, interestingly, last night at karate, my husband teaches, and they played Bull Rush at karate, which my kids were very thrilled to come home and tell me about. But our favourite game, actually, as a family, is Animal Snap. And instead of playing just normal snap, where you have to put your cards down and snap when you get two of the same number, you have to make animal noises for the snap. And if you do a wrong snap, you have to get up and do 10 front kicks.
That does not sound like fun.
Hi, my name is Eric Landers. I'm also in the School of Social Sciences and Public Policy. I'm one of three psychologists there. And I've been thinking about my favourite game, and it's a bit tricky for me because we've been playing a few games at the moment because I have a couple of daughters with chicken pox at the moment. And a way of distracting them is that when my first daughter had chicken pox, we spent the entire day playing last card with her, which she is now completely obsessed with. And the other game that we're playing a lot at the moment is Connect 4, which again is what the kids are really getting into.
We should start with a definition. What do we mean by leisure? Do we mean time spent not working or time spent doing something fun?
Well, as far as I'm aware, leisure essentially refers to any time you're not trying to survive, not trying to work or feed yourself or do anything that requires survival. Recreation is a little bit different. It's a form of leisure, but it's one where it's generally related to some sort of exercise or some targeted activity. Whereas leisure can mean a whole range of things, and the definition does shift a little bit as well. It's quite loose.
Because Sharon, one of the things I mentioned at the beginning is this idea of modern conveniences was meant to make it, especially for women, was meant to make life easier. And yet we do more housework now than we did in the 1950s. Our houses are cleaner than they were then. We didn't actually get back any of that time.
Yes, no, there is still a real obsession with cleanliness. And it is literally, if your toilet is not clean and someone comes to visit, it won't be the men in the household who are, accused of not having a clean house. It will always be, implicitly or not, that the women in the house are not cleaning it properly.
They're not doing the work.
Yeah.
We mentioned in the previous series of Great Ideas right at the beginning that leisure, the idea of not having to just spend all of your time surviving, is a relatively new idea. Eric, I'm going to throw this one at you. Is it only recently? Is it going to endure? Will we still have leisure time in the 21st century? We're in the 21st century. In the 22nd century? Or is the 20th century an aberration?
What, you're suggesting that we're going to have less and less leisure time in the future?
My brave new world is just that we all end up working all of the time.
I'm not sure that we're working all the time. I think the way that we work has actually changed quite a lot. I think we have a lot more leisure time. I mean, it's about hard for me to talk about this because I have a very unique job, I think, but I feel I have a lot more leisure time within my job, and I think our work is a lot more flexible. So, yes, I do more work at home. I think one of the reasons we do more work at home and outside the normal 9 to 5 is because of the devices that we have. I mean, I have a phone, I have an iPad that work gave me because they thought it'd be good for me to have an iPad, but I know full well that one of the reasons for that is that I'll be contactable on email a lot easier. So I think work has just changed. My work is quite flexible. I think generally work has become more flexible. So I think the way you divide your work time and your leisure time has changed, and I think technology is responsible for that. So I'm not entirely convinced that we have less leisure time. I think it's just changed.
As the robots take over, which we are discussing in another episode on the future of work, but as the robots or the monkeys take over, are we going to have to be more concerned about that idea of constantly being contactable by that iPad that your work gave you, or do we need to set boundaries around that?
I do worry about the devices and how they are taking over our lives. It's one of my interests. I'm concerned about how much time children are spending on devices. It is now common practice for schools to have iPads. I've got 2 daughters who are in school. The school that they're in, they have iPads. They don't have a huge amount of time on the iPads, but I know other schools now have this compulsory requirement that they need to bring devices. When I walk around, I see how much time people spend on their devices. I went to the beach earlier this year, and I saw 3 girls that were on the beach. This was early in the morning, and they were. I was watching them. We were walking up and down the beach and we were watching them for about 3/4 an hour while we were walking, and all they were doing was taking pictures of themselves, pretending to have fun instead of actually having fun, which just seemed bizarre to me.
Well, maybe taking a picture of yourself is fun.
I don't.
Okay,
I don't think so.
fine.
I think it bridges into the whole social media revolution that we've had, and that we have a society now which is trying to outdo each other on social media and on Facebook, which means that the traditional activities that we as humans naturally love, being in nature, doing wild things, they seem to be dulled down because there's always a cell phone in the pocket, and there's always, hey, this would be great for my friends. Well, look how cool I look doing this stuff on the beach. And you end up experiencing nature through a lens, which isn't your own eyes. So I'm also concerned, and I often say this will be the first generation of children we're raising that can unlock an iPad before they can walk.
One of the things Sarah and I was thinking about is that a lot of the stuff that we do on those devices that we maybe think of as leisure are very different to what my grandparents would have thought of as leisure. So if I'm watching a movie on my iPad, it's a very different experience to watching a movie in a theatre where I got dressed up to go and it was a thing that I did for that week. If I'm listening to music on my phone, it's a very different experience to being in a gig with a club with other people. And I wonder if a lot of what we do as leisure now has become so much more solitary. We just don't spend as much time with other people.
It has, absolutely. Like a lot of the things that we do for engagement now are very much contained within a very limited visual space. And what's missing out from that is just a whole lot of movement, a whole lot of interaction, and even going to things where they could be quite solitary before going to a movie. There was something about that shared experience of looking at a screen and being in a room together that you don't get from just looking at a screen or having earphones on. So even though the world is getting more populated and more crowded and people are living in cities and urban spaces, so amidst all of that population, we're kind of cocooning ourselves in many ways.
One of my career goals is to bring back Top Town. And mostly because I like the idea of people making fools of themselves, but also just because I remember from my childhood that Top Town was one of those things where everyone would stop and watch, and everyone knew that it was going on. And we had 2 TV channels. Back in my day, we had 2 TV channels, and so everyone stopped and watched it. And even that, we don't have that kind of experience anymore, Eric, do we? Everything is, if you're watching, but lots of people still obviously watch TV, but lots of people more and more are watching it time shifted.
One of the things that I think about is what these devices and what the technology is doing to the way that we socialise. And my concern is really about children. When children are spending 4, 5, 6, I've heard figures of up to sort of 8, 9, 10 hours on devices. If you're on a device, you're not interacting with another person. So if you're a 3, 4, 5-year-old kid and you're spending that much time not interacting with people, there's a lot of stuff you're not learning. Particularly in relation to social cues and social behaviour.
One of the things I've noticed from the work we've done with kids, and to a certain extent adolescents, is that there's this oversimplification of devices and screens. We know that there's a problem with excessive screen time. We know that too much screen time isn't good for people. It's pretty straightforward. But the oversimplification occurs when people assume that all screens are therefore bad and that we should not let kids use screens at all. We should not look at the benefits of screens, the benefits of devices, the benefits of the internet. But there are a whole heap of benefits and positive things. It's just a matter of moderation and balancing it so that they actually also get those outdoor experiences. They get to play in the mud, they get to be in the rain, all that extra cool stuff that they don't miss out on.
And there is a future of the technology here. Eric, your point about, you are contactable constantly. There's an app you can download to make it so that you can't get into your email outside work hours. So is the future, developing technology that forces us, or even developing policy that forces us into that kind of balance?
Well, the technology is new and we don't know how to use it. I mean, we're very immature when it comes to using the technology. I mean, iPhones have been around since, I think, 2007. Smartphones, the iPad's been around since 2010. We're talking less than a decade of this kind of technology. We're still trying to grapple with how we deal with the technology. And absolutely, I think in 100 years' time, well, the technology will be completely different, but we will adapt and we will change. Well, quite possibly there will. I mean, the chip in the head thing is already happening with certain things. So there's going to be a sort of an interface between, the physical body and the computers. That's going to be not more intrusive, but it's going to be more integrated, the physical body and the computer. I expect it will. I have no idea where it's going. I mean, Google Glass was going to be the big thing a couple of years ago. That turned out not to go anywhere. We had... what was the Pikachu thing? What was it? Pokemon Go was kind of trendy last year, but that lasted 6 months, I think. It was popular for about 6 months. So we don't really know where this stuff is going. But once it's become established, I think we'll develop norms and roles around the technology. Now, I mean, we know screens are good because I spent most of my day in front of a screen. I know the value of having a screen, having a computer, and I know how incredibly useful they are. However, I don't necessarily want to spend 16, 17 hours a day in front of a screen.
And it's still interesting to look. Just on the plane the other day, some people were reading on screens, but there were a lot of people with physical books. And 10 years ago, would have thought by now with Kindles and things, no one would be reading books anymore. But there's still quite a strong attachment to books. And
Scott, one of the things, I watched a talk with Will Self, and he talked about the author, and he talked about the fact that fun, play, which is kind of another word for leisure, but not really, is... his words were delightfully fundamentally atemporal. And he talks about that time when you're a kid and you're out playing in the streets. We don't even let kids do that now, but you're out playing and it's dusk and you lose track of time. And that idea of losing yourself in the fun. And his point is that we don't lose ourselves in the fun anymore. A lot of what we do, a lot of those games that we play on our phones or watching something on your iPad, it's not about losing yourself. It's just about switching off your brain because we use our brain so much.
Well, what it's about is avoiding boredom. So kids don't like being bored, as anyone will know who has kids. You get that common refrain, I'm bored, what's nothing to do? And so with the development of devices, we've sort of taken boredom out of kids' lives, which is not necessarily a good thing because boredom breeds creativity and all sorts of fun games that might take a little while for them to get into, but it offers a lot more than just consuming media, blindly. We did a survey of 2,000 parents not that long ago and found that the majority of them actually believed that it was positive for kids to roam the neighbourhood, that they would learn their way around, that they would learn independence and leadership. But a very few allowed their children to do it. These are 8 to 10-year-old children, 8 to 12-year-old children. So, and just by looking around, that kids don't own the neighbourhood anymore. We're building cities for cars primarily, and we don't know our neighbours very well, so we don't know who's down the road. So, which means that we don't have the confidence to allow our kids to experience those adventures which form memories. Essentially, I mean, you think about your best memories as a kid, well, mine at least, are usually out and about doing something crazy and wild, getting into a little bit of trouble, getting a little bit scared about something. All those memories, if we don't allow our children to experience them, I think we're taking something out of their lives. If we just allow them we're outsourcing that to a screen, you're not going to have that memory formation. You're not going to have that skill development of resilience, of leadership, of creativity, all those cool things, which really to develop it in its fullest, kids need to experience and challenge in their own terms.
One of my pet peeves is Lego. That, when I was a kid, and I keep saying when I was a kid, and I sound like about 1,000,000 years old, but anyway, when I was a kid, we just had a bucket of Lego. We just had this giant box full of Lego, and you could make anything with it. And now when you buy Lego, it's a kit. It makes a specific thing, and you have the pieces to make
it's
a
a
specific
gendered
thing.
kit.
And it's absolutely a gendered kit. Yeah. The pink one and the
Yeah,
kitchen
no,
for the girls.
we still have Lego from when my husband was a kid. We have a big box of Lego, and you can sometimes buy just the boxes, but all of the kits are, Elsa's Palace, or this for girls, which are very delicate things, and then boys are, much more interesting. But still a kind of kit that you have to follow. You follow this 10-step instruction, and then you've got your thing, rather than getting kids to just think about what can I do with all these blocks. And I think actually letting kids be bored is a really important point. And as a parent, if my kids are like, I'm bored, I have this initial like, I have to find something for you to do. I can't let you be bored. Bored means you're not developing. It means you're not learning the second language, or you're not doing music, or, I need to be in there. And so I have to step back and think, actually, it's good that you're bored.
That's called hyper-parenting.
Yeah.
When you're so embedded in your kids' development, some of it's from a positive place, some of it is from trying to keep up with everyone
Paranoia,
else.
that you're not doing the best for your kids. If they're bored, they should be instructed to do something. So it's really important for parents, when I get to that point, to say, it's good that you're bored. You go and find something to do. And one of my children is much better at doing that than the other one. But I think it's really important to empower parents to know that it's okay for your kids to be bored.
Well, and adults.
Yeah.
It's okay for adults to be bored as well, and go and find yourself something that interests you to do. Listen to a podcast, for example, or play some music, or learn a new thing.
Yeah, or even just having quiet time where you're are actually bored and resolving a bit of yourself with.
Scott, you mentioned this idea of kids especially not wandering around their neighbourhood, not finding a place to go. And there must be a lot we can do with urban design as we build cities for the future to make that easier.
Absolutely.
And to put green spaces in places and all that sort of thing.
Yes, absolutely. And there's a whole movement. It could be termed new urbanism, which is one of the terms that people use. It's essentially creating livable cities and designing cities for people on a people scale, not for cars. So we've been, especially in our major cities in New Zealand, we've been particularly poor at predicting what communities really want and need out of a neighbourhood. We've done some work actually where we've compared the North Shore of Auckland to I think it was 14 or 15 other countries around the world, other cities around the world, and we came out dead last in walkability. And it's no surprise, because we know how obsessed we are with cars in this country. But there are certainly ways of building neighbourhoods and urban planning that allows people to come together out of their houses and use shared community spaces. Because the main issue we have, I guess, is that we build big fences, we don't know our neighbours, we don't really communicate. We get in our cars, we drive to work, we sit down all day at work, we come in our cars, we drive back into the garage, and we sit down and watch TV. We don't have any need to go out in the neighbourhood. We don't have any desire to necessarily talk to people and know people. But kids is a really good way of actually doing that, because when kids are out in the neighbourhood, parents come out, and that's when parents chat, is when their kids are playing. So facilitating an urban design philosophy that allows that to happen is really important. There are some pockets around the country that are doing that now in the redevelopments. Hobsonville Point's quite a good example of that. I don't know if anyone's heard of that one, or and the Tamaki and Northcote developments are doing the same sort of thing, community-centred development, and it's really interesting to see the effects of that on the way people behave with each other.
Sharon, part of that, so people not knowing their neighbours, people not knowing who we are, I mentioned that sports clubs and social clubs and all of those things have declining memberships. How do we get back in the future to the idea of community? Because it feels a bit like we've lost communities.
And I think in many places we have. A lot of suburbs are just drive-through suburbs now. They're, as soon as you put a fence up, it's very hard to contact your neighbours. You don't even say hello as you're walking out because the fence is too tall. And so overcoming those things and enabling people to interact is really key. And social media can be quite useful in that. Where I live in Te Aratu, there's a really strong Facebook page, and there's all sorts of community events organised in clubs, and people are invited to this and that. People, if they've got too many mandarins on their tree, will put them at the front of their house and post on there. So there's a real sense of community that's facilitated through online networks, and then people are actually meeting and having walking school buses where the kids can get out, and if the kids meet each other, then they're having play days and the parents are meeting. So I think kids can be really helpful in facilitating those kind of connections.
I think part of the problem here is, though, that I think a lot of this stems from the fact that a lot of parents overestimate the risk to their children. That, I read somewhere that in America, the top concern that American parents have is that their child's going to be kidnapped, which is just incredibly unlikely to happen. So I think one of the problems is that there's an overestimation of risk when you send your kids out to walk to school, to do whatever, but particularly things like stranger danger, I think, are way overstated. And this isn't helped by the media. Sorry, the media.
That's fine.
The media is sort of partly responsible for this, because it's the rescue child or the child in trouble becomes the big story. So we've got a phenomenon in psychology is known as the availability heuristic. That when you're exposed to a particular type of event and you see it more often, then you overestimate the likelihood that these things happen. But of course, the media presents these stories more because people are interested in seeing them. But it doesn't mean they happen more. So I think part of that is there's the issue with risk, that parents overestimate risk. The other thing with play is that when kids are playing and they do get hurt, one of the things that they're learning is actually estimating their own risk. So they need to understand that if I'm climbing the tree, then there's a potential that I'm going to fall out. Whereas if the kids are constantly being told that you can't climb the tree, you can't do this, you can't do that. I mean, Sharon has sent a nice photo around to the three of us of her boy who climbed to the very top of a Norfolk pine. They're huge, and there's a photograph of him at the very tippy top of the Norfolk pine. Now, you were uncomfortable with that, but your husband was sort of applauding him and saying this is great. But you need to a child needs to learn risk. If they're constantly protected, then
and that's my husband's reasoning. So he's, we take the kids out in catamarans and out in the oceans, and we go do a lot of tramping and a lot of climbing. And my husband is very much, they have to learn how to take risks. They have to manage that themselves.
Manage the risk,
particularly for boys, but also for girls, because once they get a bit older, you won't be with them. And if they haven't learned how to take risks in a safe as possible manner, then they're going to lose out. So my husband's really keen for that. As a mum, it is quite terrifying. I have to.
Oh, it's frightening. It's terrifying to see some of the stuff that they do.
And one of the philosophical changes I think potentially we need to make as parents, and I'm in this boat as well, is that not all mistakes are bad. We try and prevent mistakes from happening. We try and prevent mishaps. We try and prevent accidents all the time. And of course, we don't want major accidents. But there's nothing wrong with a skin knee. There's nothing wrong with falling out of a tramp. Not too high, obviously, but I've had
Some things wrong with falling out of a tree.
Well, it depends. It depends how high you go up. But the kids need to know that their life has limitations, and they will remember falling out of something and hurting themselves a lot more than us saying, be careful because you might fall out of that.
Is there something here to technology? And I don't think you could. Well, maybe you could. Could you use technology for learning how to assess that risk? And I'm thinking about things like virtual reality and augmented reality. Is there ways to encourage that kind of play? If parents are so terrified of the child falling out of a tree, are there ways to use the technology?
But there's no real
that?
consequences from that.
Yeah, I've done a little bit of work this a while ago since I've read in this area, but from what I understand, you can't simulate risk. Like you can't, it has to be real risk, and the person or the child or the adult, whoever, has to understand that this is a real situation. That's when the learning happens. It's not simulating, it's not playing a computer game and sort of trying to work out, if I go over there I fall off, okay, I won't do that in real life. That doesn't cement in the brain. It's real risk. You actually have to climb trees. So it's something that, while we're seeing it disappear out of the way we parent and the way our children are growing up, we know that for certain now. We've done work on generational differences, and we know for a fact that it's decreasing. And the outcome of that, I don't think is necessarily going to be positive.
If we do get to what Keen's talked about, this 15-hour working week, which I don't see happening anytime soon, are people going to have trouble finding ways to fill their time, do you think? Or do you think we'll just fill the available time with what we have?
Well, one thing, you have to not like your job, I guess, for a start, if you only want to work 15 hours. Like, I actually love my job, and I would be a bit sad if I could only work 15. I mean, I could choose what I do a bit more.
We are in the tremendously privileged position of having great jobs.
We are incredible. Look, I was going to say the same thing. I've got a job that, as much as I moan and complain about my job, I think I have an awesome job, and I don't mind doing work when I'm home. So when I'm at home and I'm reading, I'm still reading for work, and I don't mind doing that.
If you had a robot that could do the bits that you don't like, marking essays or whatever, not saying that you don't like marking essays.
No,
but
I
just
don't
as a
like
thing.
marking essays.
Marking essays. Or if you had a robot that could do that for you, and then you could just do the fun stuff, you could just do the reading and the thinking and the cool stuff. What would
radio interviews.
And the radio interviews. What would you spend the rest of your time doing?
Oh, that's fun admin for me to do. What would I do? I would probably spend more time reading, exploring, talking to colleagues. I love talking to my colleagues. I've got 3 colleagues. There's 3 psychologists in our school, and we spend quite a bit of time where we get a bottle of wine or 2, and we talk. And we've talked about this idea of play. We spent time just talking nonsense. But while we're doing that, we're sort of playing with ideas. And I love doing that. That's one of my favourite things to do.
And that's probably
to go out for a drink with friends and talk about interesting ideas and interesting stuff, which is what makes my job interesting. So that's, again, you're saying I'm privileged. I am, and that's what I enjoy as being part of my job, and I would continue doing that.
If it's not academics, though, and it's a forestry worker who has a risky, difficult job, and we could figure out a way to make it so that they can make a living on 15 hours a week, which I, again, question whether or not we can. But would we get bored, and what is the consequence of getting bored?
Yeah, I think it's the way we structure value in the society at the moment in terms of financial success. You just get people working more, do 2 jobs, doing other stuff. Unless that completely changed and that wasn't necessarily focused and we valued happiness above financial security, then they may find more spare time. My guess is that at the moment it sounds a bit doom and gloom. I don't like to keep going on about this, but the more we rely on devices or technology to offer entertainment for us, we start to lose the skills to be able to do tasks or activities that are really rewarding, where we achieve something. Hobbies, crafting something with your hands, those hands-on things which I believe as humans are fundamental to the way we're built, because that's the way we've existed for the majority of our existence. But when we start doing less and less of those, and especially from a younger generation who are growing up without any of that, and they're not in their father's tool sheds anymore, they're all on iPads, they get up to adolescence and adulthood, and they don't have those skills to be able to find hobbies and find things that allow them to really feel a sense of achievement over something they've done that was fun at the same time. And that's not to say they couldn't pick it up later on, but it's just we tend to be consuming stuff as opposed to giving stuff back and offering something that we can provide. So that would be my concern about the way society's shifting at the moment.
Well, there's an entertainment industry that makes sure that we're not going to be bored. I mean, I'm really not up to date with what's happening with TV all that much, but I don't know how many channels we have available to us now. I mean, there's always
anything on.
There is always something to watch. I mean, it's not. I don't think we can say that anymore, that there's nothing to watch, because I think there is now. I think there's a lot of good stuff being made that you can now get through Netflix, and you people do binge watch. It's very easy to spend 4, 5, 6 hours watching TV, and it's not necessarily bad TV. I'm addicted to podcasts. I'm here now, but I'm a podcast addict, and I'm constantly listening to podcasts. So on my way to work, not at work, but on my way to work when I'm doing the dishes at home. So I'm shutting myself off from things around me as well with that. But I find them incredibly entertaining, but also informative, and I think they inform my work quite a lot. So.
I asked on Twitter last night people to tell me something that they do just for fun, that has no other purpose. And it was amazing how many people, so many great answers. It was a delightful night on social media. But it was interesting how many people said, I had to think for a really long time to think of something that I do just for fun. Can you think of anything you do just for fun?
Well, I play sport, so for me that's my outlet, although I don't do as much of it as I used to.
But is the dual purpose to keep fit?
No.
Good,
no.
Okay.
I'm not a fitness freak. In fact, I should be more of one, really, to be honest. But I just enjoy the outlet of playing in a team sport. With kids, I don't do as much as I would like, so I've sort of told myself, well, I can't join many teams at the moment, but I will when they grow up, which may never happen. I don't know, maybe that's dreaming. But that's sort of something I guess I do for fun. I play video games. I'm a gamer from way back. My dad bought me a ZX Spectrum in 1982, and I've never looked back. Therefore, my kids are gamers as well, of course. So it's always a balance for me to make sure that they're not doing too much of that. But I also do that just for fun. But again, it is one of those things that I would feel much better after doing something using my body than I would after playing an hour or two of games. It's just, I don't know what it is, but it's just something that isn't quite as fulfilling. You've passed the time, you've had a bit of fun doing it, but in the end, you sort of feel like you wasted your time a little bit, And social media is terrible for that. When I'm on Facebook, and I'm not a huge Facebook user, but when I am on it, I sort of feel dirty afterwards. It's like, oh, that's an hour of time I have just flushed down the toilet, and all I feel like doing is watching other people's highlight reel. Everyone's so wonderful, everyone's so great, what should I be doing, what should I be, and it's just, you feel like you're sort of keeping up in this high school popularity game where I don't find it rewarding at all, but yet it's attractive. It only takes one or two pics for you to see before you all of a sudden you're scrolling down further and there goes your time.
I don't think things being a waste of time is necessarily a problem, though, because when you start looking at definitions of play, wasting time or it not being productive use of time is one of the ways that they define it. So I don't think that's necessarily an issue.
I think probably waste is probably not the best word. If you're playing and enjoying it, it's not a waste because you're actually getting something out of it. It's just when it's something that you do which you didn't really enjoy at the time and at the end you don't feel good about. To me, that feels more like a waste. I would much prefer to actually play a video game because that feels, at least at the time, it's quite fun. Or play soccer or whatever, You're right. Wasting is not the right word, I think. Yeah.
I don't play video games because I just don't like them. I don't like them, and it's probably partly because I'm not very good at them.
Sharon, I'm going to put all of you on the spot, but I'm going to put you on the spot first. In 50 years, so 2067, will there be a new fun thing that we all do? And what will it be?
I don't know, it's hard to imagine what it might be. I mean, it might be something very retro like knitting, which actually my mother-in-law is teaching my daughter, and I used to be able to knit, but my husband and I were just talking about how actually if my daughter or my son doesn't learn to knit, that will be, a skill that will be completely gone. And so maybe it could be something very retro that kids look back at. Maybe we won't actually change that much. Maybe we'll still be outside, playing and running around and keeping fit, and maybe it won't be actually that much different to what it is now. Or maybe there'll be all sorts of new, technologies that allow us to do things in virtual spaces with virtual 3D, things like that.
I think it'll be virtual reality. I think we'll spend hours and hours and hours in VR. That's what I worry about. Yeah.
And potentially augmented reality, taking VR outside and using it to actually interact with people in VR, which would be bizarre. But the other thing I think which could really drastically change how we live our lives is self-driving cars. If that, obviously that's emerging very rapidly, and if that becomes the status quo in 30 or 40 years, then all of a sudden we have leisure time while we're commuting. We have leisure time in the car, and cars could be designed very differently, not like the cars we see now, but even like boxes where you have a little room, you have a treadmill, you have your computer, and you're doing stuff, and you're spending leisure time.
People, so you have other people. Public transport that is self-driving, that you have 10 other people in the car with you.
Yeah, you could do. So that and that could also free up time. It'd be much more efficient, so it could actually free up time for other things. It's potentially one of the big changes that we might see in the next few years, or decades at least. I'm
going to go back to Eric's point a while ago about liking to have a bottle of wine with his friends, and I started with Keynes, so I'm going to end with Keynes, who apparently said my only regret is that I have not drunk more champagne in my life. I thought that was a delightful way to think about leisure. My thanks to Dr. Eric Landis, Professor Scott Duncan, and Dr. Sharon Graham-Davies. Great Ideas is made in collaboration with AUT. Our sound engineer was Jeremy Ansell, and our executive producer is Tim Watkin. You can find more RNZ podcasts at rnz.co.nz, on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you get your listening fun.